Good evening. First, I want to start off by thanking Fortune Society. I want to start off by thanking Joanne and Stanley and David and the board and the co-chairs. I want to thank Francis Greenberger. I want to thank Brian Stevenson for being the hardest act I've ever followed. No pressure, Brian. Thank you. Stanley is right. I came to Fortune Society in 2010 after serving 6.5 years in a New York State prison system. And I came to Fortune Society because I had met a man named Larry Luqman White, who himself was formerly incarcerated and came to visit the facility I was at about 6 months before my release. And he said, when you come home, you should come see me at the Fortune Society. And this is probably something he probably told 1 million people, right? But I literally held him to that. And so when I got out, after I got myself situated a bit, I did that. I walked into the Fortune Society in March of 2010, and I walked up to the front desk where I saw Vilma Ortiz Donovan, who greeted me with the biggest smile I've ever seen. And I said, I'm here to see Larry White. And she looked at me like, really? Okay. And she called Larry, and he came downstairs, and he said, it's great to see you. Welcome home. Now the work begins. And I got involved in the employment readiness workshop, 2-week workshop, that taught me how to answer the felony question in 30 seconds. And 2 of those 30 seconds were talking about my felony conviction, and the other 28 was talking about me and the reason why someone should hire me. It may seem as something very small, but it was something that changed my mentality of who I was. It started to change my identity of who I was as someone who was formerly incarcerated. Because as someone who came home with a felony conviction, I fell victim to believing some of the stigma and the shame that is associated with having a felony conviction. And in this workshop, I also learned about Fortune Society's history. I learned about Stanley Richards. I learned about Vilma Ortiz Donovan. I learned about Larry Luqman White. I learned about David Rothenberg. I learned about Glenn Martin. And it inspired me. And it gave me something that I needed at the exact moment in my life, which was inspiration. Because as I mentioned, I fell victim to what I believed my barriers were. I fell victim to what I believed my possibilities were. And it's because of that inspiration that I gained that I was able to apply myself after I've redesigned what my possibilities were. I applied myself, and I completed an undergraduate degree in 2 years. I then went on and I completed a master's degree in 4 years. And I also became an entrepreneur, and I had the extreme honor and privilege of working with many people in this room and many people who are not. But more importantly, it showed me who I could be. It showed me that I had the opportunity to rebuild my legacy, a legacy that I would ultimately leave my children, who one day I would have to tell them that, yes, I was incarcerated, but I've also done all of these other things to make you understand that just because you make a mistake, that doesn't fully define you, although it is important to keep it as part of your definition. And then May 8th, 2014 happened. I was 1 week away from completing a master's degree in social work. My wife and I were getting up, it was a regular day, getting our 2 children ready for school and their regular activities. And we get a knock on the door. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and right, no one comes to your house 7 o'clock in the morning. And my wife looks outside the window and she says, it's the police. Now, someone who has lived a life that's so far from crime, it's ridiculous. And in some ways, it's really good. To hear that the police are at your door, it should scare you. But the reality is that although I was off of parole and I had successfully completed parole almost 1.5 years prior, I fully understood that you're never really out of the system. That no matter what you do, no matter what accomplishments you have, they still have the ability to come to your door at 7 o'clock in the morning. And of course, as someone who doesn't have anything to hide from law enforcement, I opened the door and they said that they were there to conduct an investigation. And they needed to come in and ask my wife and I a few questions And of course, 7 o'clock in the morning, the first thing I'm thinking is, let's just get it out. Like, let's just get it over with. Have to get up the kids and get ourselves ready. So we let them in. And in our living room, with my 2 children sleeping, in front of my wife and I, they tell us the real reason that they were there. They told us that they were from the Department of Homeland Security, from Immigration Customs Enforcement, and they were there to apprehend me, that they had a warrant for my arrest, and the fact that I was not born in this country, and my mother and I migrated here when I was 4 years old from our native Guyana, and my felony conviction put me at risk of being deported to a country that I no longer consider to be home. And it began this journey, because that day they took me and they ultimately held me for 5 months. And when I was walking out the door, I asked my wife, could she make some phone calls to some people to let them know that I wouldn't be coming or wouldn't be available. And we did this under the impression that I would be home by the end of the day because we were insured by the officers that I would be. Knowing very well that I wouldn't be, knowing very well what I was facing. And when my wife made those phone calls, one of them was to the Fortune Society. And it began an advocacy, an activist push that many people would say is unrivaled in this town. And ultimately, we were told that this wouldn't happen. To get me out of immigration detention with what I had, which was considered an aggravated felony conviction, was almost impossible. We were told that it couldn't happen, that it wouldn't happen, and some people even said that it shouldn't happen. But ultimately, on October 10th of 2014, the government decided that not only did they not want to any longer detain me, but that they were going to close the case administratively and allow me to live my life as someone who's here as a legal permanent resident. And on October 10th, 2014, I walked out of 201 Varick Street, just downtown Manhattan, and Amanda Berman, who used to work at the Fortune Society, was there among other people, including my wife, my oldest daughter, to greet me. And it was a reoccurring theme in my life where Fortune Society was always there at these very pivotal moments. And then, after we celebrated for about an hour, they said, Khalil, we're really happy that you're home. But as a part of your effort to as a part of our effort to get you out of immigration detention, we are going to submit a pardon application for you. And we actually had plans on doing that today. And we did not expect that you would be released. So welcome home, but we're on our way to submit a pardon application. And they did that. And then December 31st, 2014 happened. And again, it was a day that many people said it wouldn't happen. And it couldn't happen. And some people even said, with his type of conviction, it really shouldn't happen. I get a phone call from Amanda Berman, who I was joking with someone earlier, was on family vacation with her children. And as lead counsel on my pardon application, the governor's office called her and said, we are going to call you back in 15 minutes and you need to get your guy ready. I get a phone call from Amanda with children in the background at the theme park telling me that I needed to be at my phone in 5 minutes, regardless if the world was burning around me. I needed to be at a phone. And of course, it wasn't 5 minutes. It was an hour and a half. And pacing and probably burning a hole in the ground, walking up and down. And I get a phone call from the governor's office telling me that I was going to be one of 2 individuals that were going to be granted a pardon that would relieve my immigration consequences from the criminal conviction that I ultimately served 6.5 years for and was ultimately held in immigration detention for 5. And it was this moment in my life again where the Fortune Society was there to inspire me. Because after I hung up that phone, the one thing that I asked myself was, what are you going to do with this opportunity? Because the reality is that this is really bigger than Khalil. The reality is that while many people would tell the narrative that Khalil has done all of these things, I would say, and I maintain, that I've been given exceptional opportunities. That I have been on the receiving end of advantage because someone, and in many cases, people like yourselves, has said, what if? What if we look past the fact that he was convicted of a robbery in the first degree? What if we look past the fact that he was not born in this country? What if we look past the fact that although I don't know him, I believe that what he is going through is injustice, and I will stand up for that. What if? The Fortune Society does that every day. They've done that for 40 plus years. David Rothenberg founded this organization based on that. Someone who is not directly impacted by the system, but understood that the voices of those who were directly impacted were vital and key. The Fortune Society builds people and not prisons. And I stand here tonight accepting this award very humbly because I am someone that they helped to build. And what you see today is a reflection of those opportunities that were given to me, but more importantly, when we ask ourselves, what if? So I thank you for this award. I'm very humbled and very honored. Thank you. I got caught in a moment. Now I can add to my list of accomplishments that I've actually introduced David Rothenberg officially in a room full of people. Thank you, David. David Rothenberg founded the Fortune Society in 1967 to advocate for people impacted by the criminal justice system. And over time, it grew in direct response to the needs of those people coming out of prison. Soon, David began producing the Fortune News, featuring articles written by those who had been in prison. And today, it remains one of the most important newsletters for the currently and formerly incarcerated population, and it is still distributed to thousands of people in prison twice a year. On September 10th, 1971, David was one of the few outside mediators who was invited into the yard at Attica Correctional Facility in New York State, surrounded by over 1,000 incarcerated individuals and 40 guards that they held hostage. Although Attica ended tragically, it succeeded in raising public awareness of the horrors of the prison system and further raised the stature of the Fortune Society as one of the few organizations willing to speak on behalf of those directly impacted by the criminal justice system. Fortune has now grown to be one of the nation's most formidable advocacy and service organizations in the criminal justice system, founded on the belief that society's toughest members are also some of its most vulnerable, and even in prison, people who are in prison and formerly incarcerated deserve the chance to turn their lives around. I also want to say that David is a personal friend and a mentor, and every time I talk to him, I reflect on the story that he told of when they first did the castle. No, when they first did the play, and it was a Q&A afterwards. And he went back to his office. It was a Q&A with the people who were involved in the play, and there was a ton of questions. And he went back to the office that he had, and he said up the spiral staircase were people that were lined up there to get services. And he didn't know what to do, right? This is classic David. I didn't know what to do. He was working on Broadway. And in his genius, he said, well, someone in this line is the one that they really need to be talking to. So David, thank you for always inspiring me, and thank you for creating what we all are here to celebrate tonight. Thank you.